Mark had spent weeks planning the perfect evening. Every detail, down to the last flickering candle, was arranged with precision. The rooftop restaurant had been booked months in advance, a picturesque view of the city skyline stretching into the distance. The engagement ring, a flawless diamond set in a platinum band, nestled safely in his pocket, waiting for the moment he would slip it onto Lily's finger. Tonight was supposed to be the beginning of forever. The weight of anticipation settled in his chest as he moved through the apartment they shared. Lily was in the bedroom, humming softly to herself, completely unaware of what was about to happen. He had barely slept the night before, replaying the moment in his mind, imagining her face lighting up, the tears of joy, the excited calls to family and friends. But fate had a cruel sense of humor. As he reached for his jacket draped over the couch, he noticed Lily's purse sitting nearby. She had asked him to grab her car keys before they left, too occupied with fixing her hair to bother. Without thinking, he unzipped the side pocket, fingers brushing against the familiar metal. But just as he was about to pull them out, his hand grazed something else, something unexpected. A small velvet box. For a moment, his mind failed to register what he was holding. His breath caught in his throat as he pulled it free, his fingers suddenly unsteady. He had spent enough time searching for the perfect ring to recognize the feel of an engagement box instantly. But this wasn't his. The world tilted slightly as he flipped it open. Inside, nestled against the soft fabric, was a diamond ring. Not the one he had carefully chosen. Not the one he had spent weeks saving for. This was different, larger, more extravagant, a statement piece that practically screamed for attention. The initial confusion quickly unraveled into something much darker. Lily had an engagement ring. And it wasn't from him. The room around him blurred. A sharp ringing filled his ears as his brain scrambled for an explanation, but none made sense. There was only one conclusion. One gut-wrenching, undeniable truth. Lily wasn't waiting for his proposal. She was planning one of her own. For someone else. Mark inhaled sharply, his grip tightening around the box. A rush of nausea swept through him as he struggled to keep his breathing even. His entire body felt like it had been dunked into ice water, his heartbeat pounding in his skull. His first instinct was denial. Maybe there was another reason this ring existed. Maybe it belonged to a friend, maybe it was something she was holding onto for someone else. But deep down, he already knew the truth. Lily was a liar. A damn good one, too. The signs had been there, subtle and easy to dismiss. The late nights at work, the sudden disinterest in wedding discussions when he brought up their future, the guarded expression that crossed her face when she thought he wasn't looking. He had ignored them all, chalking it up to stress or exhaustion. He had trusted her. And she had played him for a fool. Standing there in the quiet of their apartment, ring in hand, Mark felt something inside him shift. The heartbreak that should have crippled him was swallowed by something sharper. A clarity that cut through the fog of betrayal. Tonight was still going to be a night to remember. But not for the reasons Lily thought. Instead of getting on one knee, Mark prepared for the biggest plot twist of his life. Mark had always prided himself on keeping his emotions in check, but tonight was the greatest test of his self-control. With the engagement ring still burned into his memory, he plastered on a smile and pretended nothing had changed. The dinner plans were still intact, the reservations still held, and Lily still sat across from him, laughing and sipping her wine as if she wasn't about to destroy everything they had built. Every word that left her lips felt like a knife twisting in his gut. She spoke about the future they supposedly had, her voice laced with warmth, completely oblivious to the fact that Mark had already seen the truth buried in her purse. He had spent years believing she was his soulmate, and yet here she was, lying to his face with ease, effortlessly weaving a fantasy that no longer existed. The worst part was how convincing she was. He had loved her for so long that part of him almost wanted to believe her, to dismiss what he had found as a misunderstanding. But the ring in his mind's eye was too real, too damning. Every time she reached for his hand across the table, he fought the urge to pull away, to expose her right then and there. Instead, he did what he did best, observed. He started subtly prodding, dropping little hints into the conversation, carefully gauging her reactions. He asked about work, about her plans for the future, about where she saw herself in a year. Every answer was smooth, practiced, and completely false. When she said she couldn't wait to spend the rest of her life with him, Mark nearly laughed. By the time dessert arrived, his stomach had twisted itself into knots. He had no appetite left. Then came the final lie. She placed her napkin on the table and leaned in, the soft glow of the candlelight making her eyes appear warm, full of love. She mentioned having a girls' night out after dinner, a casual remark as she scrolled through her phone, completely unaware of the storm raging beneath Mark's composed exterior. Girls' night. The word sat in the air, thick with deception. He knew exactly where she was going. So, he played along. Kissed her cheek, told her to have fun. Watched as she gathered her things, slipping her purse over her shoulder like the betrayal inside it didn't exist. And then, as she walked out the door, he followed. The city streets were alive with weekend energy, neon signs flickering in the distance as cars zipped by. Mark kept a careful distance, his pulse hammering against his ribs as he trailed Lily through the crowded sidewalks. She moved with a purpose, her phone in hand, sending messages he already knew weren't meant for him. The restaurant she entered was upscale, far more elegant than the places she usually went with her friends. It was the kind of place meant for special occasions. Proposals. A bitter taste coated Mark's mouth as he watched from across the street. His fingers curled into fists as she walked toward a corner table, where a man was already waiting. The sight of them together confirmed what he already knew. The stranger was well-dressed, polished in a way that suggested money and influence. His posture was confident, relaxed, like he had no reason to question the woman sitting across from him. Lily reached for his hand, fingers brushing lightly over his, the same way she had done with Mark just hours ago. It was sickening how easily she shifted between lies. But nothing could have prepared Mark for what happened next. Lily reached into her purse, pulled out the ring, the same one he had found, and placed it on the table. Her lips moved, her expression hopeful, her eyes locked onto the man in front of her. Mark's breath caught in his throat. She was proposing. To someone else. Mark felt a cold clarity settle over him as he watched Lily slide the engagement ring across the table. The intimate gesture, the way she tilted her head slightly in anticipation, the soft smile playing on her lips, it was all too familiar. He had imagined her reacting the same way when he had planned to propose to her tonight. The irony would have been funny if it weren't so devastating. But devastation had no place here. Not anymore. He straightened his shoulders, forcing himself to breathe as he stepped forward, weaving effortlessly through the restaurant. His heartbeat was steady now, his thoughts sharper than they had been all night. Lily had spent so much time weaving her lies, but she had underestimated him. She had assumed he would never see the truth, let alone act on it. That was her mistake. The moment he reached their table, the tension snapped like a pulled thread. Lily's entire body went rigid before she even turned to look at him. He saw the way her fingers hesitated, how her breath hitched the second his presence registered. In one fluid motion, he pulled the engagement ring from his pocket, the one he had so carefully chosen for her, the one that had meant everything just hours ago. And then, with the kind of practiced ease that came only from suppressing an oncoming storm, he made his move. The surrounding tables had gone quiet, forks pausing mid-air, hushed murmurs bubbling under the surface. He felt the weight of the moment as he watched Lily's face drain of all color. Her eyes darted between him and the man across from her, Jason. Jason, whose relaxed demeanor had stiffened, whose hand had slowly pulled back from the ring Lily had so lovingly offered. Mark had his full attention now. The confusion in Jason's face deepened, his brows drawing together as he processed what was happening. He studied Lily, then Mark, the gears in his head turning at a sluggish pace as realization dawned like a slow-burning fire. Lily swallowed hard. Her mouth opened slightly, then shut again. She was unraveling. For the first time, the smooth, effortless liar Mark had known for years looked entirely, pathetically lost. The restaurant was silent now. The weight of countless eyes bore down on their table, the thick atmosphere pressing against Lily's crumbling composure. Jason's chair scraped against the floor as he shifted back, distancing himself as if the physical space between them might somehow separate him from the mess unraveling before him. The growing horror in his eyes said everything. Lily finally tried to speak. Tried to grasp for an explanation, a justification, an excuse that could somehow make this moment disappear. But there was nothing she could say to fix this. Because Jason had already seen the truth for himself. Lily had spent months juggling lies, carefully curating her dual lives like a master manipulator, assuming she would never get caught. But tonight, in the middle of an upscale restaurant filled with people who now knew exactly what kind of person she was, her perfect facade had finally shattered. And Mark had been the one to break it. He watched Jason's jaw tighten, his entire posture shifting from disbelief to disgust. The way his eyes darkened, how his shoulders squared, it was the same realization Mark had felt earlier that night, when he had first found the ring. The feeling of betrayal sinking deep into the bones, the knowledge that the person you trusted most had been feeding you poison with a smile. Jason didn't look at Lily the same way anymore. The damage was done. Jason didn't wait for an explanation. He didn't ask Lily to justify herself or try to salvage what was left of the illusion she had so carefully crafted. He simply stood, chair scraping loudly against the polished floor as he pushed away from the table. The sharp movement made Lily flinch, as if she already knew what was coming. Mark didn't need to hear the words to understand what was happening. He could see it all, the realization hardening in Jason's expression, the betrayal settling into his bones, the sheer disgust twisting his features as he looked at the woman who had just proposed to him under completely false pretenses. The ring Lily had offered still sat untouched between them, a silent testament to everything she had tried to orchestrate. Jason didn't reach for it. He didn't say a word. He simply turned and walked out of the restaurant, leaving Lily sitting there, frozen, completely and utterly alone. The silence that followed was deafening. Lily's shoulders curled inward slightly, as if she could somehow shield herself from the weight of all the eyes on her. The quiet hum of conversation that had once filled the restaurant returned in hushed waves, whispers rolling through the space like an oncoming storm. Every person there had just witnessed the spectacular collapse of her deception. Mark could have stayed. He could have sat back, watched her squirm under the judgmental gazes, let her sink deeper into the humiliation of her own making. But she wasn't worth any more of his time. He had done what he came to do. As he turned to leave, he let the final blow slip effortlessly from his lips, something sharp, something final, something that ensured she knew this wasn't just about tonight. This wasn't just about Jason walking away. This was about everything. Lily's head snapped up, her face contorting in disbelief, but it was too late. Mark was already walking away. He didn't look back. The night air was crisp as Mark stepped onto the sidewalk, leaving the warm glow of the restaurant behind. His heart pounded, not with regret or sadness, but with an odd, exhilarating sense of freedom. For the first time in months, maybe even years, he felt weightless. Everything he had believed about his future with Lily had been a lie. And now, with every step he took away from that restaurant, from her, from the life he had almost committed himself to, he felt the last remnants of that false reality crumble away. By the time he reached his apartment, the transformation was complete. True to his word, Lily's belongings were already packed. A neat pile of suitcases and boxes sat outside the front door, bathed in the soft glow of the porch light. He had spent the hours before dinner making sure every trace of her was removed from his home, every framed photo, every drawer she had taken over, every single piece of clothing that had once filled his closet. Her key was already deactivated from the building's access system. She wouldn't be stepping inside again. Mark didn't wait for her to arrive. He didn't care to see the look on her face when she realized she had lost everything in a single night. Instead, He closed the door behind him, locked it, and exhaled. The chapter was closed. The fallout was beautiful. Mark stretched out on the couch, the cool bottle of beer resting against his palm as he let the past 24 hours settle in. The apartment, once filled with Lily's presence, was now silent, peaceful. No lingering scent of her perfume, no scattered shoes by the door, no half-drunk cups of tea forgotten on the counter. For the first time in a long time, the space truly felt like his. The satisfaction of knowing he had walked away with his dignity intact, while she was left standing in the ruins of her own deception, was almost intoxicating. The image of her face, frozen in shock as Jason abandoned her in that restaurant, played in his mind like a scene from a perfectly executed movie. She had spent months weaving lies, juggling lives, making herself the center of two different worlds. And in one night, those worlds had come crashing down, leaving her with nothing but a ring that no one wanted. Mark had dodged a bullet. As he took a slow sip of his beer, his phone buzzed on the coffee table. The screen lit up with a name he hadn't expected to see again, Jason. Curious, Mark picked up the phone, reading the message. It was simple. An acknowledgement. A recognition of the absurdity of it all. A strange sense of camaraderie between two men who had unknowingly been played by the same woman. A few days later, they met for a drink. It wasn't awkward. In fact, it was almost funny how quickly they fell into easy conversation, trading stories, filling in the gaps of Lily's deception. Jason had believed he was her only priority, just as Mark had. He had bought into her carefully crafted excuses, the same vague work trips, the same affectionate reassurances that Mark had heard countless times. The realization that they had both been nothing more than pawns in her selfish game stung, but there was also relief in knowing they weren't alone in it. By the end of the night, they clinked their glasses together in mutual understanding, both walking away lighter than they had arrived. And Lily? She had tried to claw her way back. The text started slow, small attempts at damage control. Words like misunderstanding and overreaction littered the screen, as if she could somehow rewrite reality. Mark ignored them. Then came the longer messages, filled with desperate justifications. Claims that what they had was real, that she had made a mistake, that they could fix things. Mark left her unread. Days passed. The texts became erratic, shifting between guilt-tripping and angry outbursts, the last grasp of someone realizing they no longer held control. He never responded. Because the best revenge wasn't anger, wasn't a screaming match, wasn't an elaborate scheme to make her pay. The best revenge was moving on. And as Mark stretched his legs out, took another slow sip of his beer, and let the weight of her absence settle into something that felt a lot like freedom, he knew. He had already won.